Welcome everyone to Speaker Series. My name is Danielle Mezzanato, and I just want to thank you all for being here again. Today's Slido code is #collaborate, so please make sure you go onto Slido and get your attendance in. I've got Julie Coleman here, who's going to introduce our faculty member for the day.
Hey everyone, I'm Julie, and I'm going to introduce David Anderson. He is someone most of us know. He's a professional practice associate professor in the Landscape Architecture and Environmental Planning Department, where he has been teaching and doing extension assignments. He joined our faculty in 2012. From 1995 to 2014, Dave worked as the assistant director and director of the Utah State University Botanical Center in Kaysville, Utah. This center is a 100-acre facility owned and operated by Utah State University, dedicated to the mission of promoting resource conservation. Dave has extensive experience and interest in water conserving landscapes, regional identity, sustainable design, community engagement, and environmental education. He serves on USU's Sustainability Council and USU's Architectural Review Board, signage, and arboretum committees. He's a member of the American Society of Landscape Architects and currently is a member of the Utah ASLA Executive Committee, serving as the liaison to the committee from Utah State. Dave has a bachelor's degree in ornamental horticulture from Brigham Young University and is a proud alumni of the LAEP MLA program. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Dave.
Hey, thanks, Julie. It's really my pleasure today to introduce my friend, Jereck Boss. We've been friends for over 30 years, and we started the LAEP program together. Where I was the beneficiary of learning from him. I learned a lot about graphics and presentation and design and hard work. And he's still doing all of those things in great fashion. Jereck started out with an interest in design and architecture and landscape architecture at an early age, growing up in an arid environment, and he was intrigued by that an arid environment could still thrive in extreme conditions, and that led him to USU, where I met him in 1993. And Jereck is a partner at a firm called the Office of James Burnett, or OJB, which has offices in San Diego and Dallas and Philadelphia, Boston, and Houston, where Jereck and his wife Laura and their family, where they live. And he's been working for over 25 years, but I believe about 17 of those with OJB. And he's overseen just a huge range of types of projects: institutional, corporate, campus work, athletic venues that he may talk about today, and parks and gardens, and the list goes on. As I was looking at OJB's website, they have kind of this rolling set of images and some mantras that go along. It says, the first one says place matters, and then people first, and then science drives solutions. And those three mantras really seem like some great direction for us as landscape architects to follow. Jereck has a really deep understanding and respect for the land, and he has a philosophy that design comes first. And a really important thing, I think, that he believes that good design shouldn't be neutralized or reduced by limitations, but rather this idea of limitations will stimulate better solutions, creative solutions that haven't been thought of before. And that kind of thinking has really helped him in his professional work, and he's been recognized for it. In 2018, he was elected to the Council of Fellows, or inducted rather, for the American Society of Landscape Architects. And in 2015, OJB was recognized as the national landscape architecture firm for ASLA, which is the highest award that can be given by ASLA. They only give one every year. It's pretty outstanding. And just last year, OJB was recognized by the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum's Design Museum and given the National Design Award for Landscape Architecture. And we were pleased to designate Jereck as a distinguished alumnus from landscape architecture and environmental planning last year in 2020. So lots of great things. He's got some excellent projects to talk to us about. So we'll turn the time over to you, Jereck.
Great. Appreciate all those kind words, Dave. I'll just, I'll go ahead and jump in and maybe just give a little bit of an introduction to myself. I thought I would talk today a little bit about landscape architecture collaborations and maybe just back up a little bit. I remember as a kid, I was always interested in design, and my dad and I bought a drafting table at a garage sale and refinished that together. And from that point on, I always remember drawing and picking up the pen and pencil and always creating and being very interested in all those things, whether it was architecture or fashion or graphic design or layout or just interesting spaces and art. And like Dave said, I finished my high school years in El Paso and was very taken back by the desert and how fragile that landscape was, but how beautiful it was. And with just small amounts of water, such great things could happen as it related to color and growth and sustainability in that challenging environment. In my early years at Utah State, as Dave said, we were colleagues in the studio and had a great time. Those were the Dick Toth years, and Larry Wegkamp started our kind of freshman graphic studio and taught us how to draw and talked about stylized graphics. And Vern Budge taught us about details. And it was a great time of exploration. John Ellsworth was kind of leading some efforts at the forefront of, 3D visualization. There was a new computer lab at the school. So there was still a typing lab back at that time. But graduated in 1993, was excited to find a job coming out of the recession, had looked on the West Coast in Portland and Seattle. My wife is actually from Salt Lake City. And I said, look, we'll do one good interview in Salt Lake and see what happens. And joined Gil Ostransky, Brim Smith at the time. And we grew the landscape studio there it was 2 people to about 10. And during that time there, the GSBS is kind of a multidiscipline firm, worked on a number of great projects. We worked on the Gateway project downtown. We worked on the speed skating oval. We worked on one of the light rail projects and I-15 reconstruction project. So some actually pretty big transformative projects for the city. And during that time, there was an architect that joined our office. He had gone to school with some of the partners, Tony Yamada, and he was moving back to Utah from Boston. And he had worked over the years with Walter Gropius at TAC, the Architects Collaborative, and had worked all over the world, and said, there's a bigger world out there. There are opportunities that are probably unimaginable. And it was at the time that Peter Walker had come out with Spacemaker Press, and there were emerging landscape architects. Landscape Architecture magazine had a series that was called Visionary Landscapes. And I remember seeing some projects from Todd Johnson, who now teaches there. He had done Great West Life, which was kind of this amazing project. But there was a landscape architect in there that I started following, Jim Burnett. And he had done this, it was airport farms, and he was being published on some of these things. And he was talking about this healing environment and indoor outdoor connections, and was very interested in him. And as I had a couple of great mentors, and their counsel and advice to me was, as I was thinking about moving and changing firms, you don't want to be part of something that has arrived. You want to be part of something that's on a journey. And so I reached out to Jim. I sent him my resume, and the rest has been history. And so what I'd like to do is just share a few of the projects and things that we have been able to work on over the years. We've been in business now for 32 years. I've been part of it for the last 17. When I joined, we were about 10 people. And now we're 90 professionals in 5 offices across the country. And we've really always focused, Jim has always been focused on building projects. And we have always loved getting things built. And we have always focused on getting things built, and have always felt like we've had a place at the table. I remember in an early meeting, we were designing a new headquarters for Fortune 5 company, an energy company here in Houston. And Jim said, the most powerful person in this room is the person that holds the pen. And he said, never be shy to pick up the pen and draw when you're in a design charrette and with clients. And he said, we have worked hard. Landscape architects think differently. We're consensus builders. We think not only about our discipline, but outside of our discipline, and look at all disciplines: architecture, interior design, engineering. We look at ecosystems, we look at ecology, we look at soils, we understand water. And he said, we deserve a seat at that table. And I've always remembered those 2 quotes as we've worked over the years. So a few finished projects, and some of these that we'll talk about today. In the upper left-hand corner, a new headquarters in Richmond, Virginia for Dominion Energy, which I understand has just purchased Utah Power. So they're moving west. Kind of this next image down in here, we've just helped Charles Schwab relocate from San Francisco. They're building a new campus. American Airlines, and then some other fun projects kind of in the bottom here, a new venue for the Milwaukee Bucks in Wisconsin. And then some exciting things that we have on the boards, a lot of kind of interesting projects. In the center, we've been working with the University of Texas to build their new basketball arena, the 40. And Matthew Mcconaughey, one of the outstanding alums, he's kind of been leading this effort. So kind of a new role for him, and has been working with their development team. And so we've been meeting with them and talking about the transition of sports from, moving that from a sports venue to, more of an entertainment and a lifestyle type of venue. In the bottom right, we're currently working with the city right now. We're just about ready to go public with this project. We're in fundraising right now for a deck park that will be about twice the size of Clyde Warren Park that we completed in Dallas. I didn't include it in here, but when I think about collaborations and share these projects, there's a great team that works with me shoulder to shoulder and helps to execute all of these things, as well as broader teams of consultants. So the American Airlines campus, we've been working with American for about the last 6 years to help them kind of establish this new model of wellness. They have a 260-acre campus, and they've been re-envisioning what the airline of the future would be and what mobility means to people in terms of transportation and carbon footprint, and how air travel has really made kind of access to cities around the country and around the world very easily. One of our kind of guiding goals was this one campus, one team. They have 18,000 employees that work on this campus just in Fort Worth, but they also have 90,000 employees who don't have a desk and come to the campus at least once a year for training and recertification. So we were able to help them work through this campus. On the left side of the page, where it says Skyview 8 and Garage 8, they built their new headquarters. It's a series of 4 buildings that will eventually grow to 6. Skyview 7 is where they take care of all of their tech. And then in Skyview 6 down here, they actually have a 1,000-room hotel. So when flight attendants are joining the airlines, they'll come here and they'll live, work, and play for 8 weeks until they're certified. And then all different kinds of other operations, from education that happens kind of in the center of the campus at Eagle. They have their flight training center, and then they have their flight operations. So every flight that's in the air is controlled by this kind of Skyview 2. And they have representatives from the Federal Aviation Administration that are partners that work with them to manage all of this flight traffic. But to me, the thing that was exciting about this project was they had always parked in all of these central areas on the campus, and we pushed all of the parking to the side and created a 1-mile landscaped corridor called the American Mile that connected all of these people that are working in different work groups together. And that included walkability. It included adding a system of bicycles that employees could come out, get on a bike, and ride from building to building on the campus, as well as a cart system. Now, FAA Boulevard kind of cut through that campus and it bisected it. It's fairly heavily trafficked with the neighborhood to the north. And so part of our scope of work in kind of this $100 million landscape that we worked on was to build a new pedestrian connection and underpass that would allow people to move from each side of the campus without having to cross the street. It was a series of 10 different projects that we worked on with their development team. It was a number of different architects. We worked with Caesar Pelle's office on the headquarters, on the hotel, and then we worked with Corrigan Associates and Gensler on other pieces of this campus. And then part of the goals of pulling all of this together was taking out these acres and acres and acres of mowed lawn and landscape and bringing back these plant types that are reminiscent of the Blackland Prairie, and then creating a series of spaces. The flight attendants can spend up to 10 or 11 hours in the classroom each day. So some of the program was to help them get outside, to be able to have walking paths in the evening, stormwater collection, that American Mile in the center of that. The carts are on the right here, pedestrians on the left, and then this center collection for rainwater that filtrates, moves back into the system. And then looking at a series of spaces that connect people to the outdoors. So bringing work pods in, these are kind of semi-conditioned spaces. So there's a tech table, there's Wi-Fi in these little pavilions, there's a monitor, and so employees can come out and access this. They can use kind of their central meeting room booking and reserve one of these outdoor spaces. And we have a number of these that accommodate groups from 2 or 8 up to 30 people. And then this kind of connects the headquarters across with a bridge, and then restoring the waters of the US that kind of bisect another piece of the campus here, kind of on the south end. And then looking at sustainable features. So this is at the headquarters building where we were able to develop outdoor seating areas. we were able to utilize stormwater that's captured on the roof and stored in tanks for irrigation, as well as capture blowdown water from the mechanical system and filtrate that and then use that in water features. So bringing sustainable water sources, to those that use the campus, and a major investment for American, $2 billion worth of investment that they're proud of, that is for, each of their employees. They've opened their campus now to their neighbors for walking and running, as well as retired employees who can come back and use the fitness center, ride their bike around the campus. This next project is the Milwaukee Bucks Entertainment Center, which is kind of two pieces, the head of the herd and the Deer District, located in Milwaukee, a great sports town. They're almost, fanatics when it comes to their sports. So we were working with Ginsler, a local firm, Rinka Chung, great collaborators, and then Populous, who runs a big sports group out of Kansas City. And so planning these large spaces that can accommodate, 10, 20, 30,000 people for sporting events and the playoffs, and then having food and beverage venues that start to flank some of these spaces. And then, we work through this system with the design team, this system of, overhead pieces that would allow this to be semi-conditioned in the winter months. And then looking at, how can we tent this and program this for large events? So, during this collaboration time of the project, looking at how this connects neighborhoods within the city, what the different communities needed, and how this could contribute to the quality of life in this, the arena district of Milwaukee, looking at programming, urban lounges for, adults and young teenagers, and then putting this full program together that, supports the sports venue, as well as the retail, the housing, and the hotel components. And then thinking about how can this large plaza space be reprogrammed, whether it's a 3-on-3 tournament or an X Games kind of type of event. So you can see, the Zumba class that they host in the morning, kids playing football kind of in this urban lounge that has kind of these rotating active art components from time to time. And then, concert venues that open this up, and then kind of this semi-conditioned space that they can cover in the winter. And then kind of these larger events where they can either broadcast the game or have a band playing and bring people into the space. Oklahoma City is another kind of great story of collaboration. The first project that we started was a new headquarters for Devon Energy, a new 50-story tower in Oklahoma City. And when we came to the city, they were getting ready to demolish. This is an old Louis Sullivan building. It's the last building west of Chicago that he had worked on, and one of the first high rises on on the west side of the United States. You kind of look at this image here. This was a plan that I.M. Pei had put together. There was going to be this kind of joining of all these existing kind of 4 blocks into this super block. This was kind of going to be the Tivoli Gardens. They ran out of money in the 70s, and these 2 giant super blocks had kind of been this urban blight in the city for years. And when Devon decided to stay and build their headquarters, Larry Nichols decided that they would front end fund a TIF. And so the taxes that they would pay over 20 years, they paid that up front, and it allowed us to make a series of improvements that included the Myriad Botanical Gardens, a 17-acre park. The campus was built. They did not include their campus in the TIF. So this was all give back to the city. And then we worked on Project 180, which was a complete redo of all the streets, face of building to face of building. And so our team, we hired 17 different consultants that helped us write the engineering reports, look at traffic studies and traffic models. And we kind of right-sized the lanes and planned the traffic and brought it back to kind of a two-way system. You may have heard of Jeff Speck. He's kind of the walkability guru. And Jeff worked with us. He was instrumental in helping establish some of that vision. The other thing that happened, they were having their 15-year kind of, it had been 15 years since the bombing at the Mira building in Oklahoma City. And it was, you know, kind of a time for healing. And so this first floor, Larry Nichols decided that we would make this part of the public realm. You know, everything in Oklahoma City had bollards around it. Everything was K-12 rated, you know, so you couldn't drive a truck through it. And so, you know, opening this rotunda up to the community, on this first floor, this became a food hall that anyone in the city could come and enjoy. It was subsidized. They hired a world-class chef who ran, you know, 8 different food venues in here. Really became a gathering place for the city, and a front lawn and front yard to the Myriad Botanical Gardens. An auditorium space that's for the Devon employees and for their training, as well as for community events. And then a lawn in here, and then a series of dining courts, and then security around the tower that was kind of accomplished by a water feature. It was also, you know, a thought process of, you know, bringing people inside and outside, opening the campus to families, looking at security in different ways. And then walkability was really important. The mayor, Mcconaughey, at the time, was really upset. Oklahoma City had been labeled, you know, one of the fattest cities in the country. They were labeled the least walkable city in the nation. And so the streetscapes became, you know, one of these really important projects in the regreening of downtown. And collectively, you know, the city ended up losing about £1 million together by thinking about things differently, by bringing people from the indoors outside, by promoting walkability, by getting grants to fund bicycle stations, bringing people back downtown. This next project is a project that we worked on in the studio in Houston. This is it's a little over, it's about between 5 and 6 acres. It was a giant concrete bathtub. And so if you look at the before image, the city of Houston and the tax district had built this $20 million bathtub that holds about 68 acre feet of water. Clearly not something that's an amenity in a city. And so they were looking for an idea. How could we green this? What could we do that's different? But how could we build a park or a green space that people could come and walk and have activities, bring their dog, kids could play, help this neighborhood to be walkable, but still be able to flood 2 or 3 times a year. And so we worked with them. We devised a scheme that would allow us to put something similar to a roof garden system in this. We looked at 2 alignments of the roadway. It's about a 1/4 mile section, and decided that we would put a series of culverts underneath that would allow us to collect all of this water for 223 acres of the city and collect that kind of in this green basin, grow the capacity of that, and then look at what this park would do when it had static water levels during a 2-year storm event or a 10-year storm event. So in Houston, we have clay soils. The water table is very high. So it's not about putting water back into the system. It's about managing water, and then it's about moving water out into the Gulf through a series of bayous and systems. So there's an active pump station that's part of this, that after all of this water is collected, it's pumped back out, because the water just, it won't find its way back into the water table because it's at 6 feet. And so we were really excited to, build a resilient park that has kind of an elevated activity lawn here. So you can kind of see in the shadow right in here, that will all fill up with water. And then you have a series of paths that you can ride your bike. There's overlooks, a pavilion that sits in here. And then all of these systems we designed so that they could be, saturated with water. So this was kind of that roadway section that we did, putting these giant culverts in that, run a quarter of a mile, 4 wide. This was kind of looking at that bathtub section. We couldn't penetrate the bathtub either because there's a series of several hundred pilings that hold this bathtub in so it won't float in that water table. So really exciting project for them, utilizing native plant materials that can handle being submerged and inundated. Other projects that we've worked on in the studio that have been great collaborations, a lot of roof gardens. We're seeing, third, fourth generation roof gardens now, and owners and businesses and even, residential buildings starting to see the benefits of these spaces. United Airlines has their headquarters here. This offers them an amenity space that's on a level 12 overlooking the city. And then there's kind of a native seated garden that sits above that on level 13. There's an event lawn that they'll tent. They'll have kind of their Go Texan Day or their blood drive out on that roof garden. And then it gives, a variety of different spaces for people to enjoy and to be able to connect with the city. And then in terms of, collaborating together, working with the architect and the interior designer, we're designing water features inside this lobby to, mitigate sound and have water as art, bringing green wall systems that go down into a tunnel system and, traverse different levels within the building. And in each of these kind of having great teams. This is a project that we've just finished phase 1 of this. This is one city block in Richmond, Virginia. It's the home of Dominion Energy, and they are consolidating their headquarters into this project. And so we've got about a 1 million square foot office building. This is a 1 acre roof garden that we looked at. The program was to bring amenities to the employees. They were in very dated buildings, some of them 40, 50 years old, and bringing, great food components to their employees with healthy eating choices. There's a fitness center in here, and then having that dialogue between the different types of programs. So outdoor conference room, outdoor dining, and then a fitness deck, a fitness lawn, and then using the balance of that space and working with local consultants and soil scientists and, an artist to put, some pieces in the landscape to have spaces where people could have, a walk in the garden. So this is kind of the phase 1. This is the phase 2 that's currently under construction. It'll have conference centers. It will be open to the public at the plaza level and then for food venues along this area. And then underneath this roof garden, they have kind of a hall that their employees can meet in that will be open to the city. So lots of native plants, lots of native systems. And these were images that were taken, end of the season. So getting plant materials just right. You can love the brown of the fall and still have some of these plants that are flowering late into the season. And then looking at the metrics of the benefits of this, the city of Richmond has a combined sewer outflow. So there's stormwater and there's sewer in a flooding condition. They combine and dumps that water into the river. And so looking at and kind of understanding how the roof garden system could mitigate heat, clean the air, intercept water, and then, kind of take these a parking lot and green, that space and deal with stormwater runoff and capture, and to alleviate that system for the city. And then looking at what that garden might be in the spring and the fall and the winter. And then collaborating with great partners that let us do planting mock-ups at the nurseries where we can take pictures, talk through plant materials with clients, look at color and texture and sizes and seasonality of each of those materials. This is another project that we're working on, maybe one of the most important urban spaces in San Francisco. We're about 8 blocks from Union Square. This is 101 California. It's a historic plaza that was designed by Philip Johnson and Bill Calloway, who was, one of Peter Walker's early partners, and then later moved on to found SWA. And so a really important space that its time had arrived, that we would, rethink security in these ziggurats that were, in the plaza, and look at kind of a building refresh. So some of these existing things, pots with petunias in them, some of the activities that they were doing, but, a large urban space that wasn't, kind of fully being utilized at the heart of the financial district. So working with Hines and BCJ, a great architect, they do many of the Apple stores. We were able to redevelop this plaza, bring a new food and coffee venue out into the plaza, bring natural lawn into that space. We developed a water feature, and water is a hot topic, particularly in California. And so working with great water feature designers and engineers, we were able to develop this water skin that's just, half an inch of water in the plaza that uses the same amount of water as 2 employees in the building would use each day, just through flushing toilets, making coffee, and having the building cleaned up for them. And then, looking at 3D visualizations with the team and what these spaces might be, softening some of these materials up with wood, breaking down some of these barriers that were, pots and bollards and walls, and lowering some of those things, and then creating great access and having natural lawn in the heart of, a very busy city. And then re-envisioning water from this big kind of spilling feature to something that could just be very, very thin. And also, making great views for those who are in the building, kind of looking down at the plaza. Another project, this is in Oakland, where we're doing kind of a sky park. There's a transit connection that's right here. So people getting into the transit can take an escalator to this level. It's a park that's on kind of level 6. And then there's another sky garden that's on level 50 that has a great view back to San Francisco. So an event lawn, dining areas, and then looking at some of these spaces for, a little band shell that's in here. So really looking at space in a different way. As cities begin to densify, green spaces become more important. I think that, as we think of COVID, being able to get outdoors and really, have this connection with biophilia and, breathing fresh air and touching the landscape is really important. And so this is a park that we're working on with our client right now that will be open to the public. We're rethinking the lobby. So instead of an enclosed lobby, we're looking at how we can have kind of indoor-outdoor spaces, and then a view garden that's on the 50th floor looking back across the bay into San Francisco. Sports venues have been a really popular thing. We've been fortunate to work with Baylor over the years. This was a collaboration with Populous and the Baylor family. And so the campus here to the south, the Brazos River cuts this apart. This was kind of an old vacant lot that had been left barren. The Baylor Basin, it was full of invasives. And so this was kind of a total rethinking of how can we bring a great sports venue, and what would kind of key important programs be for that. So parking that could be shared between the football stadium and the track stadium, connecting the campus through a new plaza, new bridges that bring people over, and then along the riverfront, working with great ecologists and water experts that helped us navigate, again, the waters of the US, and the Corps of Engineers to take out all of the invasives, bring back in slope stabilization, and replant all of these areas. And then kind of how people connect from the campus, and then the different programming pieces. This is kind of the game day. We took their old field, made a little game day plaza here. This is all tailgating. And then in this Baylor basin that's been revitalized, we actually have sailgating. So a dry campus, and if you're on the boat and you have a boat pass, you can have adult beverages, which has been highly popular for the football season. And then this is all of kind of that riverfront restoration program. And then dealing with slope in the landscape and, large crowds. 45,000 in the stadium and often thousands outside the stadium. And then this is kind of the reestablishment of that kind of landscape that can get wet. I think we're almost near the end here, but this is another stadium. So this is kind of kitty corner. This is the new Baylor field house. So this will be for their men's and women's basketball program. And so this is kind of looking again at this kind of next layer of activation. Oftentimes these have always been barren spaces. And so we've kind of called it a grasketball court in here, a deck with some furnishings that people can sit on for pregame, seating around here, lights that bring you through the front, and then kind of this super graphic of the Baylor Bear that works. We've been working with their marketing team and with the branding team, as well as Populous or AECOM and their sports group on this to, have a great venue for the student athletes and the community. This will be something that they'll share with the city. This is an existing office building that will stay in place for phase one. And then this parking garage will have retail at the ground level. And then there will be a sister building that will happen at this point. We've also been working with the city, and we're excited that we'll be developing this riverfront connection here. So again, they're interested in kind of this sailgating opportunity associated with the basketball facilities. And then just some of those graphics, and working with Jack Porter, a great sports and branding consultant. And then, understanding some of these hashtag moments, and opportunities where alumni can bring their kids and their grandchildren and, relive some of these memories and leave a legacy and develop school spirit. This last project here is Levy Park. It's a urban park that we developed in Houston. It was part of a land swap deal. It used to be just a community pool and a little baseball field that was here. We reworked the planning with the city that allowed us to aggregate a park space and then densify some of the adjacent lots for office, a future office, and then multifamily that's here that can all share kind of this front yard, backyard. We've been working with public-private partnerships. So food venues, a pavilion with a children's room and a birthday room, large children's garden, 2 event lawns so that one can rest while the other's recovering. I don't know if that's me. It'll go away in a second, sorry. So interactive children's play, accessibility, sparing kind of water features, event lawn, games and activities. Dog parks are hugely successful in our urban parks and our urban spaces. The dog walkers, they come early in the morning and they're late at night and throughout the day. So they're always helping to police the space. And the more people you can have in the space, the better. In a lot of our urban parks, we do counts. So we're interested in the number of women and children in the space. As long as that number is above 50% or more, we know that that space is healthy. And then a last part, kind of mixed use. There are a lot of kind of true mixed use projects now. This is residential condo, residential apartments, a hotel and office component that's mixing with retail, about 100,000 square feet of retail, all at grade. And then these little pavilions that we've been collaborating with Michael Shue on out of Austin, who's a great kind of national retail presence in helping us with this. Hanover Companies that builds a lot of multifamily housing. They understand really well to kind of develop this scheme that gives an event lawn, opportunities for water and performance in this lawn, and then dining spilling, excuse me, dining spilling out, and then curbless environments throughout the space. And then just looking at some of the renderings that we've worked through with the team and doing paving studies and working with vendors that help us understand how we can execute these patterns in the pavement, you know, how we can work through, you know, the structural and the mechanical to have these thin roof gardens sections over glass pavilions. And then this is kind of a connection to Buffalo Bayou Park in Houston. It's a project that SWA had worked on that's been a great addition to the city. So some of the things that we have worked on. So thank you.
Thank you, Jereck. That was great to see all of the diverse project you guys are working on. We've got some questions here from some of our audience and our listeners, and we'd love to just ask you a few.
Great.
To start us off, we have a student who's asking, and you spoke to this a little bit, but if you could kind of expand, with COVID and climate change, how is your firm adapting and evolving when it comes to landscape design for the future?
So there's probably maybe two ways of doing this. One is we have actually not been in the office for almost a year now. And so through Zoom, through Teams, we have all been kind of, and different types of technologies, we have been kind of all connected through the internet and the web, and collaborated that way. So we've used Drawboard. We obviously use all of the Adobe products, and we've all kind of set up at home with the best Wi-Fi that we can have. And then, you know, we've offered our team, you know, through some generous benefits, just some things that help them to be able to get out. So we've encouraged everybody to take time during the day to, you know, get out of the space that they're in, to connect with nature in terms of, you know, sustainability and, you know, looking towards resiliency in the future. You know, I think people have seen the importance of green space as we've all kind of been cooped up in our spaces wherever they are. And the denser the city, the more valuable that green space has been. And so I think we'll continue to see things like the park we're working on in Oakland, where, you know, we're taking a parking lot that has a new building, it's connected to transit, and we're making a park in that little connection so people have an outdoor space. So maximizing those things. As it relates to sustainability, we have, you know, we have two initiatives within the office right now. One is we have what we call OJB Lab. We have several designers who have various backgrounds, either in research or material sciences or ecology, that have put together kind of a checklist. So we run each of our projects through that. It takes kind of the best and brightest information from LEED and all of the other kind of living building types of things that are out there. And so we do a review with that. They help us in areas of research. So if something is unique to water on a project, we have that team in place to help us to either find white papers or look at best practices. In each of the teams that we're working on as well, we have great consultant teams too. So we have always encouraged everyone to pick up the phone and ask their colleagues to help as well. And, civil engineers, mechanical engineers, they are always interested in helping us solve problems. The second thing that we have done is we've actually been working on a couple of grants, and we're in the second year right now. We've been looking at the effects of that roadway corridors have on landscape, and how far out from those corridors those effects are. So we've been monitoring, particulates that are not only found in the air, but also in the soils and those systems, as well as looking at what plants have absorbed. And so, we're really excited with the work that Allison Harvey and Rosa have been doing in our Philadelphia office. In fact, just last week, they were with the team in the field putting out new test plots. So we've had kind of a first round of test plots, and now we're on a second round of that. So, we talk a lot about innovation. We talk a lot about responsibility and what landscape architects can do. And it kind of goes back to that first thought, we wear many hats as landscape architects. And I sometimes, we even say, sometimes the title landscape architects might even be a little bit limiting to what we know and what we do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is so true. And it actually brings me right to our next question. Talking about collaboration and what we do as landscape architects versus when is it time to collaborate. When you're looking at some of these large stormwater projects that your team did, are you partnering with civil and hydraulic engineers, or are they on staff with your team? Or how do you know when to pass off some of that work and when to take it on?
So collectively, we're just landscape architecture. We do a little bit of planning. Like I said, we really like to build projects. So if we think the planning effort will get us to a project that we can build, we'll do that. But, for instance, the Conrad Sauer project that I showed you, we had a team we had our civil engineer who was on the team. We had hydrologists, and then we had, structural people, and then we had water quality people that were helping us with that. But, we were leading that design effort, and they were consultants on our team.
Yeah, and I think a good follow-up question to that from one of our students is, with such large, complex, cross-disciplinary projects, do you ever find it difficult to realize your vision among competing agendas, and how do you contend with this?
There's a little bit of science and a little bit of magic to that. So, there are often, sometimes competing goals. And so, projects always have the challenge of a budget, and there are deadlines, and there are, parameters that have to be met, right? And there are always constraints. But I think, not to quote Bruce Mao, but I think design pushes us to great solutions. And so, I think one of the things that we have always tried to do is present the best of ideas and raise our hand and fight very hard for those. And I think most of the time we succeed, And I think we're getting better at walking away when we realize that there might not be an alignment of, goals.
Yeah. This is a more technical question from a student, but looking at some of the projects you showed with bioswales and larger stormwater management, how do you find in an arid climate, sometimes there's, critics with, do bioswales work well in climates that are arid and then have large storm events? How do you choose the right plant materials and keep those plants alive when there's no water and also when they're flooded?
So in each of our offices, we have several plant experts. For instance, the project that I showed, Dominion, that was our first project in Richmond, Virginia. It was along the James River, and so we actually we hired a local plants and soils expert to be part of our team. And so we could understand plant materials and soil systems in Richmond. We actually spent a long weekend with that consultant and went and looked at a number of different projects and how they were working. And that consultant actually works for a construction company and a nursery, which we thought actually made a great partner in that situation because they had installed things and they had worked through things, and they had great lessons learned. And so I think when you find partners, you have to ask the hard questions, and you have to do your homework. And I think that's where OJB Lab and even our marketing team, they have been very successful in when we're putting a team together, making phone calls, looking at portfolios, looking at projects that teams have done before. And then we often do an interview process before we put a team together.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think your projects kind of show the importance of cross-disciplinary collaboration, and that we're not always going to have the answers, so it's really important to go to someone who does. And I think we have time for one more question for you, and I'm gonna kind of combine two from our students. So you mentioned that 50% or above of women and children seen in your public spaces is a measure of your design success. Would you say that's in regards to safety? And are there any books or sources that you would recommend we look at for evidence-based design?
So, I think a great example and kind of case study for this would be Bryant Park in New York. So when Dan Biederman and the Bryant Park Conservancy re-envisioned that green space that's adjacent to the library, there were a lot of issues and challenges there. And so, there was a lot of great work that looked at, why were there issues? What did they need to do? What could they change? And so there were a number of different metrics that they looked at. They wanted great restrooms. They kept the restrooms really clean. They put fresh flowers in the restrooms. And then they started doing counts to see who was in that space. And when they got below a certain metric, they knew that things weren't working because, and this has always kind of been an indicator to us. When we first went to Oklahoma City, I was going every week. We went for about 5 years. I was walking around the city at night and I was walking in the Myriad Botanical Gardens. I would never see anybody in that space. They had dug out the pond that was in the middle. They'd put the spoils around the outside, so you couldn't see into the park. And women and children only go into spaces where they feel safe and comfortable and where they can understand their surroundings. When we finished the park, I remember going back and we were walking through the park. We just finished dinner and it was about 10:30 at night. And there were 3 young women that we crossed paths with that were jogging in the park that night. And we knew we had done that. So in our parks and working with our teams, they always do that count. And if that count starts to get a little bit out of whack, then they make some adjustments, and they'll even poll some of the, people that are in the park and ask them specific questions.
That's really interesting, and I think it's great that you all constantly go back to your designs and check on if they're working, and it's not like you walk away from them and they're done. I think that's all we have for time today. I want to thank you for coming and speaking with us. That was really interesting and a huge number of great projects. I just want to share my screen and I'll show you all the upcoming lectures that we have. So our next lecture is going to be with Gina Ford and Bree Hensold, and that's going to be on March 5th. So we look forward to seeing you all there. And we'll take a little bit of a break for all the grad students and Jereck, who are going to have a discussion after the lecture. And we'll see you all in about 10-15 minutes.
Julie, can I just say, I just want to thank Jereck for such an impressive presentation, and it's with such pride that you as an alum have joined up with Jim and built, I think, an empire and just a canon of wonderful, beautiful work of significant scale and forceful solutions. And it's just, it's really impressive. And I just want to thank you for taking the time out to get our students all enthused. I'm like levitating, I think, after seeing that. Thank you so much.
I appreciate your comments, Todd. I remember back in the early days in the studio, you and Mark came and presented Great West Life. You did a studio, and I was blown away by that design. I was in love with the work that Pete and Martha and Ken Smith were doing. And, you had brought a slice of that amazing work, to Denver. And the one thing I didn't say in this lecture is I think you have to find who your heroes are. And I think those heroes in design can be, if it's in cinema, if it's in, the academy, if it's architects, if it's, fashion design, find who you're interested in, find who moves you, and follow their work, and reach out to them. You will be surprised. They will make time for you. And the last thing is find great mentors. Find someone who can give you great advice on career moves, on money, on how you're doing professionally, and someone that holds your feet to the fire. Because I think sometimes we sell ourselves short. And I think on this call there are amazing people that are going to be on this call 20 years from now, showing us things that I never thought of or I was never able to do in my career. So have great vision in yourselves.
That story of a father and a son refinishing a drafting table that led to this resonates with me.
Well, thank you, Jereck. And if you are a grad student and you have signed up to talk with Jereck, we're going to be meeting in about 7 minutes. If you are a graduate student who hasn't signed up but you'd like to attend, feel free to join us back here and I can admit you into our talk.
Great.
All right. Take care, and we'll see you next time.